Shkech.
V'omer Rish Lakish, so the Gemara says in Bab Metzia that Aktana could be kaina her get with a kinyan chatzer, and the Gemara has a discussion if a chatzer mishum yada israbay or mishum shlichos, if that chatzer shaladam kainalai is because his chatzer is the equivalent of his shliach, and it's like shluchah shaladam kemaise, or it's like his yad. So the Gemara says, how could you say asvara that chatzer mishum shlichos is rabbi? Yeah, this is the back. How could you mi ikalaman the omar chatzer mishum shlichos is rabbi? How could you have a havamina that chatzer works because a chatzer is considered like your shlichos? If we see a braisa that were marba that a ganev could be kaina agneva through a kinyan chatzer, ainli ala yade, it says in mimatze timatze biyade hagneva. Ainli ala yade gage chatzere vekarfife minayin talmud lemrei matze timatze, that a ganev could become a ganev through the davar haganov, the gneva coming into his chatzer, and that's the way he's kaina the gneva. And if you say the reason why a chatzer is kaina something for me is because it's like my shliach, then it's ancient. You should say in shliach lidvar avera. That's the Gemara's question. So in the Gemara there are two answers. Ravina says there's two answers. Sai Ravina, Sai Rav Sama, both give criteria for when I say Ein Shliach Lidvar Avera and when I say Yesh Shliach Lidvar Avera, that are both coming to explain why a Chatzer is not included in that criteria, and therefore even though Ein Shliach Lidvar Avera, by a Chatzer will be Yesh Shliach Lidvar Avera. So Ravina says, Heicha Amrinan the Ein Shliach Lidvar Avera, Heicha the Shliach Bar Chiyuvahu. Aval b'chatzer de lav bar chiyuvahu mechayev shelch. The only time I say Ein Shliach Lidvar Avera is where the Shliach is a bar chiyuva. That's the first chiluk. That's Ravina's chiluk. Rashi says, what's the svara? Because sha'afu muzar hasan pata shaleach damrina like divrei arav divrei atam divrei mishemin v'lei hayalei lasis. The svara of Ein Shliach Lidvar Avera because divrei arav divrei atam divrei mishemin is only shayach when the shliach is being told by the rav not to do it. If the shliach isn't being told he's not a bar chiyuva, it's nishtach in divrei rav divrei atam divrei mishemin. That's what Rashi explains, which is the svara that the Gemara said in Kiddushin L'cheira. So, first thing. Okay, let me just finish. Then Rav Sama says, I'm going to come back to what it said in the middle. Rav Sama says the criteria is when he buy avid, he buy layavid. When the shliach is a bal bechira, who has a choice whether or not to do the shlicha, so then if he did it, it's ein shliach lidvar avera. But where the shliach is like a chatzer, an inanimate object that doesn't have free choice to decide to do it, it's not ibai avid, ibai layavid, then yesh shliach lidvar avera. Rav Sama obviously is excluding less than Ravina. Ravina says whenever the shliach, anyone who's ibai avid, ibai layavid is l'cheira also not a bar chiyuva. As they come to misvara, a chatzer is ibai layavid is not b'chlal a person. Rav Sama only excludes when it's ibai avid, ibai layavid. Ravina excludes anyone who's not a bar chiyuv. That's the beginning of the Gemara. Let's first look at Taisvus. There's a few Taisvus. So Taisvus, the second Taisvus on the sugya. Yeah, we're not. Ein shliach lidvar avera. Taisvus says beperek ha'ish mekadesh ika diyalef mishchutei chutz tichsev hu v'lei shluchei. Ika diyalef mishum dehava le meila tficha shnei ksuv mabam kecha diyesh shliach vein malam. Seemingly, Taisvus is just giving us the background. The Gemara in Bab Metzia said Ein Shliach Lidvar Avera. Taisvus says, where in Kiddushin do we learn it out from? Right? But Bashkafa Rishayna, this seems problematic. We learned yesterday there's two general shittas in ein shliach ledvar avera. Is it Gzeras HaKasav? We learn it from the psukim, which would be the psukim that Tosfos said. Or is it B'Yeseda Milsa B'Taima Asvara? Because Divrei Rav, Divrei Talmud, Divrei Mishem. We had the Ritva says it's Gzeras HaKasav. That the Gemara says Asvara, that's Al Derech Harei. But that's not the basis. It's not totally in the Svara. So the Ritva will say we learn it from the Psukim, from Shnei Ksiv Mabam Kechadei Melamdim, or from Shchutei Chutz. Rashi brought the Svara, Divrei Rav, Divrei Talmud, Divrei Mishemin. How does Tosfos learn in Kiddushin? Tosfos learns clearly that it's a Svara. The Svara is not L'Ravcha, the Milsar, like the Ritva says, it's Al Derech Harev, you have the Svara applies. Tosfos says the reason for Ein Shliach L'Dvar Avera is because Divrei Rav, Divrei Talmud, Divrei Mishem. Because Tosfos says that where the Shliach is a Shegeg, it's not Shaykh Divrei. That Tosfos asked on Me'ilah, my Mal, how's it Shaykh by Me'ilah Ein Shliach L'Dvar Avera? By Me'ilah, the Shliach is a Shegeg, so there's no Svar of Divrei Rav, Divrei Talmud, Divrei Mishem. So Tosfos in Kiddushin is clearly learning the din is not a Gzeras HaKasav, it's a Milsa B'Taima, it's Misvara. And where the Svara doesn't apply, the din doesn't apply. Here, Tosfos in Bab Metzia seems to base it on the Psukim, seems to go like the Mahalach of the Ritva, that it's a Gzeras HaKasav. And it's just saying the two options, which pasuk I learned it from. Now, let me bavar. L'chayra, the Gemara clearly says Shnei Ksiv above Kechadei Melamdim. Our Gemara in Kiddushin says that in the Hemshech of our Sugya. There's no question that we say Ein Shliach V'Avera. The shaila is what's the pshat in that the Gemara says by us Me'ilah and Shlichus Yad or Me'ilah and Tficha Shnei Ksiv Mabam Kecha. Is it the pshat that be'etzem Ein Shliach L'Dvar Avera because of a Svara Divrei Rav, Divrei Talmud, Divrei Mishem? Elamai, we have a shaila. Say Gzeras HaKasav, you see certain Averas where there's Gzeras HaKasav that Yesh Shliach L'Dvar Avera. And that the Gemara says, I can't learn from those Averas to other Averas. And therefore we revert to the Svara that Divrei Rav, Divrei Talmud, Divrei Mishem. Or is it the Pshat that the Pasuk is the Makir? When I have Shnei Ksiv Mabam Ka'echa, that's a raya not to say it anywhere else. And the Yisaid of the Din Ein Shliach V'Avera is from the Psukim. The Ritva and Kiddushin clearly learns the Yisaid of Din is from the Psukim. Tosfos in Kiddushin clearly learns the Yisaid of Din is from the Svara. Because Tosfos says, Amay Mal, that where there's no Svara, where the Shliach is a Shegeg, Hat Minish the Din. But Tosfos...
Right, what do you say about Shchutei Chutz?
What?
What do you say about Shchutei Chutz?
Shchutei Chutz is a pasuk, yeah.
So how do you learn over there?
We'll see, because Shchutei Chutz doesn't say necessarily according to everyone. That's anyways not according to everyone. So we'll see that. So l'chayra Tosfos in Bab Metzia seems to be shaloi lefi mahalach shaloi b'kiddushin, right? Pashat. So two simple possibilities. Again, we're just so far trying to get the background of the sugya. The sugya is in a lot of places. The two main places is Kiddushin and Bab Metzia. Then there's a few little Gemaras in Baba Kama. There's a Gemara in Me'ilah. So one way we could say is that Tosfos learns that we learn it from the Psukim. Like he says in Bab Metzia, you see that. Elamai, Tosfos learns it's like a taima dekra. We don't learn these psukim as a gzeras hakasav b'lei taima, as a chayk. We learn that the pshat in these psukim is they're being megala the svara of divrei Rav, divrei Talmud, divrei Mishem. And therefore, we only apply the limit of these psukim when there's the svara of divrei Rav, divrei Talmud, divrei Mishem. We could add to this, but I don't want to get. I want to get the main inyanim now. Yeah, that's the first general way. Yeah, got Pasha. So in other words, Taisvus is saying the makir is the psukim. Taisvus says in Kiddushin the din is totally in the svara, because that's how we're understanding that the psukim are saying a milsa b'taima, and that's why Taisvus in Kiddushin says the din only applies where the svara applies. Both the same thing. That's one possibility. Another possibility to be metavech, to reconcile Taisvus and Bab Metzia with Taisvus and Kiddushin, is because there's a very basic question in the Gemara here. In Kiddushin, we seem to say, and that's what Taisvus clearly holds, that ein shliach l'dvar avera is a svara, because divrei harav, divrei hatalmud, divrei mishem. Divrei harav, divrei hatalmud, divrei mishem, the svara could be understood in two ways we learned yesterday. Either like the Smasas and says in Rishonim and Bab Metzia, because Kasavra Shala Yishmalai, because the Rav didn't really expect the Talmud to listen to him and go against the Eibishter. Savra Shala Yishmalai. Or because Loi Haya Loi Lases, because the Talmud shouldn't have listened. There's two svaras why by Advara Veira Kamen Ishzagan Shlucha Shladim Kemais. Whichever of those svaras you're going to say, they're not shayach by a chatzar. By a chatzar you can't say kasavar shala yishmalei. By a chatzar you can't say loi haya loi lasis. So what's the Gemara's question? That if ein shliach l'dvar avera and chatzar mishum shlichas es rabbai, then how could chatzar work to be kaina gneva? Even if chatzar mishum shlichas es rabbai, by a chatzar is not shayach ein shliach l'dvar avera. Learns Taisvus maybe as das emfretaka the Gemara. The Shema is clearly learning like that. When the Gemara says that where the shliach is not a bar chiyuva, or according to Rav Sama where the shliach is not ibay yavid ibay la yavid, then I say yesh shliach l'dvar avera. The reason is taka because either of these two svaras is a reason why I don't have the svara of divrei harav, divrei hatalmud, divrei mishem. Atas emfer taka the Gemara. Was will I bazei Taisvus and Bab Metzia? Taisvus is explaining, so what was the havamina of the question? This question that I just asked you. What's shayach a havamina to say ein shliach l'dvar avera by chatzar, if by chatzar is not shayach the svara of divrei harav, v'divrei hatalmud, divrei mishemin? Zak Taisvus, the kasha of the Gemara was because we have limudim from the psukim. And therefore the Gemara and the question thought that ein shliach l'dvar avera is even where there's no svara because we learn it from the psukim. Ravina and Rav Sama both answered that it's because of a svara divrei harav, divrei hatalmud, divrei mishemin, and therefore where the svara doesn't apply, you don't say it. That's what's more mistaber to say in this case. If you look in Bab Metzia and the Pnei Yeshua, it says the Bekitzer, he seems to say the second way also. Al derech.
So what role do the psukim play? If according to Taisvus that the makar is a svara, what's the role of the psukim?
So the role of the psukim still has two possibilities. The role of the psukim, you could still say the first way I said. I'm learning the psukim, but I'm saying pshat in the psukim. Let me explain that a little bit more in a second, so it should be clear. But you could still say that. But you could say even more than that. The role of the psukim is not necessarily that I'm learning it from the psukim. It's meila tzvicha shnei ksuvim abam ka'echa doesn't have to mean that from there I'm learning that ein shliach l'dvar avera. The Gemara had a question v'neiluf minei that I should learn from meila that yesh shliach l'dvar avera, because the alfina chet mitruma there's a gzeirus hakosef of shlichos by advar avera. And that But the yisoid of why by Dvar Avera could be because of the Svar of Divrei Talmud. Now let me just add a little bit explanation in the first Eifen that I'm saying that I'm time of the crowd. What's the pshat time of the crowd? I'm saying a svara for the pasuk. We learn from the psukim either kashneksuv mabam kechadei melamdin or from shchutei chutz that by a dvar avera is ein shliach dvar avera. Yeah. There's a general din of shluchei shaladam k'maisei. We learn from Truma, from Gerushin, right? By Meila, it says also that shluchei shaladam k'maisei. By Tvicha, it says also. So since Shnei Ksuvim say that yesh shliach dvar avera by avera, from here we learn that all averas are ein shliach dvar avera. In order to say that these Shnei Ksuvim abam ka'echad ein melamdim is differentiating between averas and anything else, dafich dachabin asvara in them. Why is an avera different? Maybe these are just two new psukim to say shluchei shaladam k'maisei by everything. And I'll find some chiluk, just like we did by Truma and Gerushin and Kachim, that each one has some tzrichasa. Therefore, the Shnei Ksuvim abam kechad ein melamdim is miyusad because there's a svara to be mechalek in the inyan of shluchei shaladam k'maisei between an avera and something else. So even when I'm learning from the pasuk, it's with this svara. Afro Pikain, I'm still telling you what I told you before, that the Taisvis who brings the psukim is not coming to give the makar of ein shliach dvar avera. He's coming to Bavar, and how could the Gemara have a question to begin with? Because we could learn from the psukim, it's tam gzeras hakasav. Ein chanabi. Once we have the whole picture, so the psukim megufa is a svara, and that svara is what Ravina and Rav Sama is saying. Now let's go to the next step. So Ravina and Rav Sama, what?
Ein chap the last word.
What? If I have Shnei Ksuvim abam k'echad, yeah, I have Meila and Tficha, the Torah says yesh shlichus. So learn from there that ain't shlichus. Maybe say Shnei Ksuvim abam k'echad, that ain't shluchei shaladam k'maisei. By Gerushin we have a pasuk yesh shluchei shaladam k'maisei. Good, so you'll have to find some chiluk. Why are you saying that the Shnei Ksuvim abam k'echad is because this is an avera? Maybe it's by Kachim ein shluchei shaladam k'maisei. Milas Kachim. In order to make it a Shnei Ksuvim abam k'echad, all that we have is by Meila Gzeras Shavad Shluchei Shaladam K'maisei. Just like by Gerushin, just like by Kachim, just like by Truma. To say that it's Shnei Ksuvim abam k'echad is coming to separate between Avera and everything else, I have to have a svara. The svara is Divrei Arav, Divrei Talmud, Divrei Mishemin. There's a reason to make a distinction between Avera and everything else. B'meila, now I have a pasuk by Avera. I say Shnei Ksuvim abam k'echad ein melamdim. It teaches me by Avera that Taki don't say shlichus because I have a svara to be mechalek. Otherwise, it's just a shluchei shaladam k'maisei. How do I know the common denominator is an Avera? That means even the Shnei Ksuvim abam k'echad or the shchutei chutz. Shchutei chutz is the pshat because by shchutei chutz it says hu v'lei shluchei. So how do I know that the category over here is a dvar avera? I have to have some svara that the limud, the binyan out from this is tan avera. But I'm telling you, even according to this, the reason why Taisvis has to say the limud is still like I told you before to explain the question of the Gemara. And Taisvis in Kiddushin says L'fi ha'emes, it's for sure a smart. Clear? Passion. Now, in the answer of the Gemara, so we have Ravina and Rav Sama. So I told you, l'chayra, the answers of the Gemara is hagufa. Both Ravina and Rav Sama are saying that ein shliach dvar avera is a svara. It's not a gzeras hakasa, and therefore it doesn't apply where the svara doesn't apply, which according to Ravina is when the shliach is not a bar chiyuva. According to Rav Sama, it's when the shliach is even, it doesn't have a choice in the matter. L'chayra, according to the svara of divrei Arav and divrei Atam, again, Rav Sama, Ravina is going much further than Rav Sama, right? Rav Sama is making a much narrower exclusion. He's only being memayet a small number of cases where the guy mamish has no choice in the matter. Ravina is being memayet that every case where the shliach is not a bar chiyuva is yesh shliach advar avera. He's including much more. If ein shliach ledvar avera is the svara of divrei Arav, divrei Atam, divrei Mishemin, then we should l'cheira have to say like Ravina. Then where is going to be the yetzim min hakla? Where is going to be yesh shliach ledvar avera? Any case where the shliach is not a bar chiyuva, kannst du nicht sagen divrei Arav, divrei Atam, divrei Mishemin. So, and Rashi says it by Ravina, not by Rav Sama. Rav Sama, Rashi doesn't say any svara. By Ravina, Rashi says, why is it totally if the shliach is a bar chiyuva? Because dafka then is shaykh to say divrei Arav, divrei Atam, and divrei Mishemin. So what's Rav Sama? So there's two possibilities. There's three possibilities. There's many possibilities, but I'll tell you three possibilities. There's one possibility that ain't a chanami. Ravina svara is divrei Arav, divrei Atam, divrei Mishemin. Rav Sama doesn't hold of the svara of divrei Arav, divrei Atam, divrei Mishemin. And therefore, the only time he says you could have shliach d'avera where the shliach, whoever the intermediary, has to do it, so then you can't not be miyachas to the mishaleach. It's kilo, I forced it to happen, right? It's not ibay yavid, ibay layavid. No, yeah. So there's a machlekes rishonim. There's three shittas. I'm going to tell you two of them now, and in a few moments I'll tell you the third one. The machlekes Ravina and Rav Sama, right? Who's the halacha like? Ravina or Rav Sama? The Gemara makes an afkamina halacha like we're going to come to in a minute. So what's the halacha? La halacha, when do you say yesh shliach udvar avera? Do you say it whenever the shliach is not a bar chiyuva, or only when the shliach is not ibay yavid, ibay layav? In Shulchan Aruch, in the Ramah, he paskins in two places, in Shin Mem Ches and in Kuf Pei Beis, wherever the shliach is not a bar chiyuva, is yesh shliach udvar avera. Heistas, he's paskining l'cheira like Ravina, the Ramah. In the Rishonim, you see clearly it's not pashut. The Rishonim, some say it looks, want to be mechiach, the halacha is like Ravina. Some want to say the halacha is like Rav Sama. Kenich der Zagin, Hagufa. The Ritva maybe learns that the halacha is like Rav Sama. He's going to learn like you'll learn bepashtas, like I told you before, that Rav Sama and Ravina are arguing if it's a svara or not. Ravina holds ein shliach d'var averas the svara of divrei Arav, divrei Atam, divrei Mishemin. The Ritva haltoch nicht as I sagzeres akasav, because he's going to say Taka Rav Sama argues. Ravina, who says that whenever the shliach is not a bar chiyuva, clearly learns it is misvara. That the Ritva says in Kiddushin L'fi Ha'emes it's not misvara is because he says Ladina like Rav Sama. That's one possibility. And this is what they're arguing. A second possibility, other Rishonim say, the Ritva in Bab Metzia, there's Chidushei HaRitva HaChadashim. In Chidushei HaRitva HaChadashim, he writes that it's not a machlekes. The Hani le pligi el amarnak at chada time amarnak at idach time of v'chenika. It says also in the Shita, such as Svara, they're not arguing. That means both of them are saying different Eifanim when for sure is Yesh Shliach Udvar Avera. When the Gemara makes a nafkamina, it's not saying a nafkamina lahalacha. It's just saying what would come out, the difference between understanding the two svaras. But both of them agree that either of these things, either Ibai Yavid, Ibai Layavid, or Shliach Labar Chiyuva, will cause us to say Yesh Shliach Udvar Avera, which fits with the fact that they're both coming and being mechadish, that ain't shliach d'var avera is only mitzad asvara of divrei Arab, divrei Talmud, divrei Mishemin, and either of these svaras take away the svara of divrei Arab, divrei Talmud, divrei Mishemin. If Rav Sama was saying only by Yavid, by Lo Yavid, and when the shliach is not a bar chiyuva, you still say this din of ain't shliach d'var avera, so then clearly he's arguing on the svara. But if they're not arguing with each other, then they're both bringing two ways to show how the svara of the two echetimses, how the svara of divrei Rav, divrei Talmud, divrei Mishemin doesn't apply.
How is the Ritva the one to say this?
What?
This is a kasha on the Ritva himself.
Yeah, but the Ritva doesn't say it. So I don't know exactly what it is. I have to see. In the Ritva, there's Chidushei Ritva and there's Chidushei Ritva Chadashim. In the Ritva doesn't say that. The Ritva Bab Metzia. So I don't know if the Ritva Chadashim is from a different Ritva, but this says what I read you. That's the Ritva Chadashim. I'm going to check in the Shita afterwards. I think in the Shita they bring the Spar also, but I see here in the Ritva Chadashim. The Ritva was I have here before, and he said different. He definitely doesn't say it. I think I had a raya that the Ritva clearly doesn't hold like that. So it must be two different shittas. But that's a second possibility. They're not arguing. A third possibility what's taka the difference between Ravina and Rav Sama? Ravina's svara, Rashi says divrei Rav, divrei Talmud, divrei Mishem. What's Rav Sama's svara? So what I told you before is Rav Sama's svara is if he doesn't have a choice in the matter, you can't not be miyaches to the mishaleach. Maybe I'll tell you beifinacher, perhaps. Maybe, like we said before, it looks like the Pashtas HaGemara that their answer is being mechadish, that ain't shliach udvar avera, is because of the svara of divrei Arav, divrei Talmud, divrei Mishemin. In the question, Tosfos says we thought it's Gzeres HaKasav. In other words, we're explaining Tosfos that Tosfos is coming to Bavarn, that we think it's Gzeres HaKasav. The answer is mechadish, it's a svara. What's the svara of divrei Arav, divrei Talmud, divrei Mishemin? We had two eifanim. One eifan is kasaver shala yishmalei. One eifan is lei haya lei lasis. Maybe this difference is the difference between Ravina and Rav Sama. Ravina says kasaver shala yishmalei. That's totally if the shliach is a bar chiyuva. If the shliach is a bar chiyuva, so then I didn't think he's going to do it. I could say I didn't think he's going to do it. As the shliach is nishkim bar chiyuva, so then why didn't I think he's going to do it? But if it's loy haya loy lases, we're saying mitzad the shliach. The loy haya loy lases is maybe not the pshat mitzad you're because you're doing an avera. Loy haya loy lases because the mishaleach told you something that he's not allowed to tell you. Kilo, you're listening to him when he's going against what the Rav is telling him to do. For us folks to him, you shouldn't be listening to him. Not because if it's loy haya loy lases, was can arapnem in the loy haya loy lases, only if he doesn't have a choice in the matter. If it's not ibai loy yavid, das nemt arap the loy haya loy lases. Bar chiyuva nemt arap the kasava shala yishmaloi. That's another possibility. So these are three ways in the answers of Ravina and Rav Sama. This is just Pashut Pshat, general. I want to show you now another two tastes to get to the main taste. But first, so one ha'ara in the Gemara over here that we have to point out. Rabbi Kiveger asks a question and remains with the tzarchin. It's a pliya atzuma. The Gemara asks a question, and because it could be tomorrow we'll have something that might help us answer. So it's important to know the question anyways. The Gemara asks a shaila. On that Ravina said, in between Ravina and Rav Sama, there's a brief interruption in the Gemara. Ravina said that when the shliach is not a bar chiyuva, then yesh shliach udvar avera. Frag the Gemara elamayata ha'emer liisha va'evet su v'ginvuli the lav b'nei chiyuva ninuhachin amit mechayev shelcha. Then ha'isha va'evet you should say yesh shliach udvar avera. Zak the Gemara no. Amrit isha ve'evet b'nei chiyuva ninu v'hashta miya leslu l'shlumei. L'snan niskasha isha nishtachar evet chayavin l'shal. The Gemara is a pliya atzuma. What's pshat in the question of the Gemara and in the answer of the Gemara? That isha ve'evet is not a bar chiyuva in the question of the Gemara. And that the Gemara is mechadish in the answer, they are a bar chiyuva. That's regards to chiyuv to pay. We thought they're not mechuyev to pay. We say no, they are mechuyev to pay later on. Who cares if they're mechuyev to pay? However, we're explaining the svara bar chiyuva, l'cheira is dependent on whether it's a isser on the shliach. Divrei Arav, Divrei Atalmud, Divrei Mishemin, which is the svara for Ravina, is dependent if the shliach has an avira, if the Rav zokt him anders. Anyone had a havamina that by a isha va'evet, zene ze nicht over an avira when ze gavinin. The Torah doesn't tell them not to gaven. What does it mean that the Gemara thought that they're not a bar chiyuva? And that even in the answer, the Gemara only says they're a bar chiyuva because niskar sha'isha chayavis l'shalim. Why is that the reason why she's a bar chiyuva? A bar chiyuva because ba'atzam teira b'achta firaisa pukta ze v'yadrina. Isha is chayavis b'chol isurim shebateira. So you see, the Gemara is a pliya atzuma. There's no simple answer for it, but we'll see. But this you have to bear in mind. That this is in passing. In Tosfos, okay, so Tosfos iboy lo yavid. No, maybe we'll have it. Tosfos iboy lo yavid has a question from a Gemara. The case of the Gemara is, I told a shemer, do me a favor, watch my animal for me. And I showed him someone else's animal. So he stole the animal because he thought he's taking my animal for me. And the Vaila, he stole it. And it says, Am chayiv. Tosfos ein shliach udvar avera. So Tosfos asks on the lashon iboy yavid lo yavid l'cheretz iboy yavid lo yavid. I should say ein shliach udvar avera. First of all, why is Tosfos only asking on iboy yavid lo yavid? He should ask on shliach bar chiyuva. The shliach is a bar chiyuva. In that case of telling the shemer, the shliach is a bar chiyuva. Should ask on both answers. Why is he only asking on Rav Sama? From the case of Hayameishcha Yemeis B'Shizgan. The teretz is clear that Tosfos learns that where the shliach doesn't know it's an avera, he's not called a bar chiyuva. Since the reason of bar chiyuva is because divrei Rav, just like Teisus said by Me'ilah, by shegeg is not shaykh divrei Rav. The whole svara of bar chiyuva is that where the svara of divrei Rav and divrei Talmud doesn't apply, you say yesh shliach udvar avera, and therefore if the shliach doesn't know he's a shegeg, is the same as any bar chiyuva. This you say Teisus said by us in kiddushin benegir to shliach shegeg. That's the same thing as shliach shegeg, right? That's the first thing we see there in Teisus, like we saw by us in Teisus. But this is not pashut. This is shitas ha-Teisus. If I would say that ein shliach udvar avera zagzeras hakaso from shnei ksuvim abam kechat, it's a pasuk, so then it's totally if it's an avera. Then even if I would say bar chiyuva, I could say it's totally if bepayel it's an avera. And that's how the Ritva learns taka. That the shliach doesn't know that it's an avera doesn't take away the ein shliach udvar avera. But Teisus is mechadish in his answer that where the shliach doesn't know, even like the answer ibay yavid libay layavid, it's called ibay yavid ibay layavid. It's not called ibay yavid ibay layavid, which is a big chiddush. Comes the last Teisus. So the Gemara said, what's the nafkamina, ravina, and nafsama? Again, according to some Rishonim, it's asking a nafkamina lahalacha. And the Gemara's question is a question lahalacha. According to other Rishonim, the ravina and nafsama are not arguing. We're asking nafkamina just to understand the difference between the two svaras. So the Gemara says, Kayin da amar Yisrael kadish liisha grusha, or ish da amar liisha akli likam. So there's a whole machlekes Rishonim Kayin da amar Yisrael. That's not finished that angle yet. Teisus asks a question. L'chayra, a Kayin who's mekadesh agrusha. It says Einay leika elam kein ba, according to Rava. The avera, the chi of malchus, seemingly the avera only happens when he's ba. So the kulei alma has no shaykhs to ein shliach udvar avera. There's no avera by the kiddush. Is that what Teisus is asking? There's no avera by the kiddush. Or Teisus is asking that there's no malchus, so there's no nafkamina ladina. I'm going to show you. There's two ways to learn the Teisus. Yeah, what's Teisus asking? Eine leika kiddush baal leika kiddush eine leika baal leika. What's the question? There's still a nafkamina. Eber at every given af avera. So avera was hat nicht kemalchus. What Teisus? Seemingly Teisus is numbing on that Rava who said kiddush eine leika baal leika. It means because there's no avera till he was leika. Right? You with me or not? Zak Teisus, two answers. The first answer is the kibal achakach leika ala kiddushin, and therefore there's an nafkamina. If you say yesh shliach udvar avera, that the mishaleach, the kohen, could get malchus for the kiddushin after his baal. Mashenkin if ain't shliach udvar avera, eina chanami. There's no avera b'shas the kiddushin. Later on will be an avera. Inami yesh leimar the after Rava nafkamina the yesh shlichas chol na kiddushin being shlichas in chol na kiddushin. Teisus says the nafkamina is if the kiddushin are chal or not. So now it seems like Teisus knows as a davar pashat l'kulei alma the kiddushin itself is an avera. The only nafkamina is if he's leika for it or not. Because if the kiddushin, according to Rava, Teisus' question was that the kiddushin is not an avera, then why ain't chal in a kiddushin? But then you have back the question I asked you, how does Teisus learn? Is Teisus learning the shita of Rava is negiyah to malchus, or the shita of Rava is negiyah to the etzem avera? From the second teretz, it sounds like Teisus never had a shaila about the avera. From the question of Teisus, it sounds like he did. So I want to show you two ways to understand it. First, what's the machlekes, the two answers of Teisus? Garbe Pashtus, it sounds like the machlekes, the two answers of Tosfos is what's pshat ein shliach lidvar avera. Does ein shliach lidvar avera mean the mishaleach is pater, which is what it's mashma from the Lashon Hasma I wrote to you in the shir that I gave you today? Or is the Maisa batel? Ein shliach lidvar avera means he's ka'isa me'atzvei as nish k'shliach when the Inyan is nishchal. Seemingly, that's the machlekes, the two answers of Tosfos. The second teretz of Tosfos holds that the Maisa is batel. If the Maisa is batel, hater nishkin kasha, then you have a simple nafkamina. The first teretz of Tosfos seems to hold the Maisa is not batel. Therefore, he doesn't have that nafkamina, and he has to come on to a different nafkamina, the chibal achakach leika afal kiddushin, that we see the other Rishonim have a problem with that answer, because that gets into issues of Asra, Suffolk, all kinds of issues. But Tosfos had to say that answer, seemingly al karchach, because he didn't hold of the second answer. So seemingly the two terutzim of Tosfos are mechulik in this Yisayid. If ein shliach l'dvar aveira means ois shliach the ma'aser wasn't chal, or ein shliach l'dvar aveira means just that the mishaleach is patur. However, that these two svaras was the machlekes the noide b'Yehuda mitshar gdei leidere. That's what they were arguing in, right? L'cheiras ha-machlekes tzvei tirutzim from Tosfos. Noide b'Yehuda has taka starke raya to zayin yisayid from the second teretz, but it's a machlekes. It's two tirutzim in Tosfos. So first, the Noide b'Yehuda wants to say, no, it's not a machlekes, two terutzim in Tosfos. Tosfos says two answers that are both true, they're both correct. So the first answer doesn't argue on the yisod that if it's an avera, eina kiddush and challah. Second answer, he just says two different answers. That's his first thing that the Noide b'Yehuda says. It's hard to say that, I think, because if the first teretz of Tosfos holds of the yisod of the second answer, then why does he say this answer? The first answer of Tosfos, you see the Rishonim have a big problem with. It's Hasra Safek. That some of them are deichet answer. The second answer is a klar izach. So why would he first say the first answer if he holds of the principle of the ikarin of the second answer? That's why it seems difficult to say that. Besides that, the Noide b'Yehuda brings himself that you see in the Shita that it's a machlekes to two answers. But Alpha Pikein, he wants to say, less man de palik le ola das adam me'olam, he says. No one ever thought that ein shliach v'avera means that the Maisa is kayam. For sure the Maisa is batel. So if the Maisa is batel, what's the machlekes to two terutzim in Tosfos? So he wants to say for sure the first teretz of Tosfos also holds the Maisa is batel. Elamai. So here you see why it's not pasha. I told you from the second teretz of Tosfos, you see for sure there's an avera. No, there's no avera b'shas to kiddushin, even according to the second teretz of Tosfos. The avera happens later. The reason why the first teretz of Tosfos doesn't hold that the kiddushin are batel is not because he learns that ein shliach dvar avera is not negated. Of course, when you say ein shliach dvar avera, the Maisa is batel. But by kiddushin, there's no avera b'shas to kiddushin. Once he's baal, later on becomes an avera. It's too late. The kiddushin have been sheichal given. The second teretz of Tosfos is not mechadish that ein shliach dvar avera is the Maisa batel, because that's l'kulei alma. He's mechadish that even though it only became an avera later, through that eina kiddushin chalin. And this we still need to know exactly the svara. He's a little bit mekatzer. How taka does that work? He says that's a hal bevart because the whole kiddushin is for the beila. So okay, we'll learn more in this sugya with Hashem tomorrow. The Vaila zal debish to help and alle zal sein a shliach with var mitzvah to machen a tzavsa v'chibur mit alekos to connect the whole world with the Eibishter, machen a dir le yisparach b'tachteinu. A guten Tag.